Welcome back to Beyond the Badge, where the most powerful stories are not always the loudest ones. Sometimes the most earth-shaking moments happen in complete silence, in stillness, in the quiet dignity of someone who simply refuses to break. Today's story begins on an ordinary Tuesday morning, the kind of morning where sunlight pours gently through tall glass doors, warming polished tile floors and long beige hallways lined with championship banners and college pennants. Lockers slam in their familiar rhythm, laughter bounces off ceilings, sneakers squeak against tile. Everything appears normal. Everything appears safe. But in Brookwood High School, one of the most well-funded, well-connected, and quietly ruthless schools in the county, normal was never what it seemed. And on this particular Tuesday morning, two worlds were about to collide. One carried a smirk sharpened by years of unchallenged privilege. The other carried something far more dangerous: quiet, unshakable dignity. Her name was Maya Kingsley, 17 years old, new to Brookwood, new to this town, really. She walked through those glass doors wearing a faded blue hoodie, a worn leather messenger bag hanging off one shoulder, and her chin lifted, just high enough to disguise the nerves buzzing beneath the surface. In her right hand, she held her class schedule, folded carefully, like a quiet promise she had made to herself. Fresh start, new school, no drama. She had said those exact words to her father the night before. He had been sitting at the kitchen table, reading case files as he always did, glasses low on his nose, a half-finished cup of coffee beside him. He looked up at her over the rim of his glasses and smiled. "Maya, you have never needed drama to make an impression. Just walk in there and be exactly who you are." She had laughed softly. "And who is that?" He had set down his papers, folded his hands, and looked at her the way only fathers look at daughters they have spent a lifetime quietly protecting. Someone who knows the difference between right and wrong, and isn't afraid to stand on the right side. She had carried those words like armor into the morning. She scanned the hallway now with careful eyes, noting the groups already formed, the invisible social walls already built. She had learned to read rooms quickly. It was a survival skill she had never asked for. Room 231, 232, AP Literature getting closer. This is going to be fine. But Brookwood High was not just a school. It was a kingdom, and kingdoms have kings. Evan Lorne was a senior. Tall, broad-shouldered, draped in a red and gold Letterman jacket that seemed specifically designed to announce his arrival before he ever opened his mouth. He was the kind of young man who had never once walked into a room unnoticed, and who had long since come to believe that was simply his birthright. His father was Officer Dale Lorne, 12-year veteran of the Brookwood Police Department. Well-known, well-connected, a man whose presence at school fundraisers and athletic banquets had become as routine as the American flag above the gymnasium door. Together, father and son had constructed something invisible but immovable inside the walls of Brookwood High. Not a legacy of courage or merit, but of connection, of influence, of the quiet, unspoken understanding that certain rules simply did not apply to certain people. Evan had never once been formally disciplined. 3 vice principals had come and gone. Teachers whispered in parking lots. Students learned the unspoken rule in their very first week. Don't challenge Evan Lorne. Maya Kingsley had not yet received that memo. Room 235 was just ahead. She was almost there. Then came the impact. It was not accidental. Nothing about it was accidental. A deliberate shoulder, broad and hard, slammed into her from the left. Books flew from her arms, papers scattered across the hallway floor like wounded birds caught in a sudden wind. The hallway went completely silent. Not politely hushed, not gently still. Frozen. Because everyone recognized the move. Everyone knew exactly who had made it. Evan Lorne stood over her, one hand tucked into his jacket pocket, that permanent smirk carved into his face with the ease of someone who had never once been told no and truly meant it. He did not reach down to help. He did not say, "Excuse me." He looked down at her the way people look at things that simply do not belong. "Watch where you're going." 3 words. Casual. Almost bored, but the cruelty behind his eyes said something far longer, something that had no decent words in any language. "You don't belong here." Most students would have mumbled an apology, gathered their papers, made themselves smaller, and disappeared into the nearest doorway. Maya Kingsley rose slowly to her feet and looked directly at him. "You bumped into me on purpose." The hallway nearly gasped. Not out loud, no one was quite brave enough for that, but the air shifted the way air shifts before lightning strikes. She did not yell, she did not cry, she did not threaten or beg or perform for the audience that had gathered without taking a single step. She simply reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and pressed record. Such a small gesture, such a quiet one, but it cracked something in that hallway, something that had been frozen and fixed for years. The power dynamic, so long immovable, shuddered for the first time. For the first time in longer than anyone could remember, Evan Lorne was not in control of the narrative. He stepped forward. She did not step back. "I suggest you back off," she said, her voice steady as riverstone. She was not performing bravery, she was simply refusing to participate in fear. Around her, something began to happen, quietly at first, then less quietly. Other phones appeared, other screens lit up. Students who had spent years looking the other way found themselves pointing cameras forward. Something about her stillness gave them permission they hadn't known they still possessed. "You want to know what you really are," Maya said, her voice clear and measured. "You are a coward who survives on intimidation. That is all you are." The bell rang, but no one moved, because something had rung louder, the sound of one girl's courage landing in the silence where compliance used to live. The next morning, Maya found her locker tampered with. Combination jammed, fresh scratches on the metal, a message without a single word written. She photographed every scratch, every dent, reported it to the front office, where a tired secretary told her she would look into it, in the practiced tone of someone with no intention of doing so. Maya wrote that down too. The second confrontation came the following afternoon in the school courtyard beneath a wide blue sky. Evan arrived with 3 friends and an audience already forming. He knocked her lunch tray from her hands. Water soaked her sneakers, food splattered across concrete. "Oops," he said, with a smile that held no apology. "I am going to report this," Maya said, composed as morning air, "including the racist remarks." Something shifted in his face. Not shame, something colder. Rage. Because she still was not afraid, and fear was the only currency Evan Lorne had ever truly traded in. He grabbed his own arm suddenly, performed a wince. She attacked me! Every student watching knew the truth, but Evan was not speaking to them. He was already dialing. "Dad." One word and the air turned to lead. The sirens arrived 9 minutes later. Students had not dispersed. More had gathered, pulled by some quiet instinct that told them this moment mattered. Phones were raised, recording, bearing witness. Officer Dale Lorne stepped out of the patrol car in full uniform, badge catching the afternoon light. He walked with the authority of a man who had long decided the truth was whatever he determined it to be. He did not ask questions. He did not review footage. He did not look at the 40-plus students standing with phones raised. He looked at Maya, and he decided. His hands found her wrists before she had spoken a single word. Cold metal clicked into place. The cuffs were tight, tighter than necessary. "Make it tighter, Dad," Evan said from somewhere behind her. The words landed like a stone thrown through glass. "Don't bring that loud black attitude into a situation you created," Officer Lauren said quietly. A silence fell over the courtyard unlike anything before it. Not confused, not uncertain, ashamed. Maya stumbled slightly as he pushed her forward. Her wet sneakers dragged against the concrete. Her hoodie trembled with her breathing. But her eyes never broke. Not once. She held her chin in the exact same position as when she had first walked through those glass doors that morning, because what lived beneath the surface was not panic. It was patience. Because Maya Kingsley knew something that Evan Lorne did not, something that Officer Dale Lorne did not, something that not a single person in that courtyard had thought to discover. Maya was not just the new girl. She was the daughter of the Honorable James Kingsley, Associate Justice of the State Superior Court, a man who had spent 26 years on the bench, a former civil rights attorney who had argued cases before the highest courts in the land, a quiet, broad-shouldered man who wore old reading glasses and drank his coffee half-finished, and who had spent his entire career fighting exactly the kind of abuse of authority that was happening to his daughter at this very moment. But Maya had never mentioned that name, never used it as a shield, never flashed it as a weapon, because she wanted fairness, not favoritism. And that made what was happening even more devastating. They had looked at her and assumed she had no power, and so they felt completely free to humiliate her. They had absolutely no idea what they had just done. The Brookwood Police Department's holding area was a beige room with fluorescent lights and the low, persistent hum of an old HVAC system. Maya sat in a plastic chair, wrists marked from the cuffs, hands folded quietly in her lap. She had asked for one phone call. 3 sentences: her name, her location, and one instruction. "Abba, please come, and please come as yourself." 51 minutes later, the door to the holding area opened. The desk sergeant looked up from his paperwork, then stood, not as a choice, as a reflex. The man who walked through that door was not tall in a threatening way. He was not loud. He wore a simple dark coat, old reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, and carried a worn leather briefcase that had seen the inside of more courtrooms than most lawyers ever would. The Honorable James Kingsley, Associate Justice of the State Superior Court, Maya's father. He stopped in the doorway for just a moment when he saw her, his daughter sitting in a plastic chair, wrists marked, shoes still wet, blue hoodie slightly torn at the shoulder. Something moved across his face that he did not try to hide. A father's pain, ancient and quiet and devastating. He breathed once, slowly, then walked in. He did not raise his voice. He never needed to. The conversation with the station commander lasted exactly 14 minutes. When it ended, Officer Dale Lorne had been placed on immediate administrative leave pending full internal affairs investigation. Every frame of footage from every student's phone had been officially submitted as evidence. Evan's false report had been documented, flagged, and forwarded to the county district attorney's office. And Maya walked out of that building into the cool, late afternoon light, her father's hand resting gently on her shoulder, the way fathers rest hands on shoulders when words are simply not large enough. They stood beside the car. The sky had turned that deep amber color that only comes in the last hour before dark. Somewhere nearby, a bird called once and fell quiet. Her father did not speak for a long moment. Then, very quietly, "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. Another silence. "I should have been there." Maya looked up at him, at the man who had spent his entire career making sure the law protected everyone equally, at the man who had taught her, in a quiet kitchen over half-finished coffee, that standing on the right side of something sometimes meant standing there alone. "Abba," she said softly, "you've always been there. I just had to show up first." His jaw tightened. His eyes, steady and strong for 53 years through courtrooms and injustice and long, hard nights, filled in a way she had never quite seen before. He pulled her close and held her the way fathers hold daughters when the world has shown its ugliest face, and the daughter did not flinch. At Brookwood High, the footage spread the way truth always eventually spreads, faster than anyone planned, further than anyone expected. Within 48 hours, the Brookwood High Board had convened an emergency session. The superintendent issued a public statement. Local news carried the story across 3 counties. Evan Lorne was suspended, pending full investigation. 3 students came forward in the first week, then 4 more, then 7, students who had witnessed previous incidents they had been too afraid to report for years. The vice principal, who ignored every complaint, submitted his resignation quietly on a Friday afternoon when the hallways were empty. And on a Monday morning, 2 weeks after she had first walked through those glass doors, Maya Kingsley returned to school. Blue hoodie, leather messenger bag, chin lifted. This time, the hallway did not freeze. This time, a girl from her AP literature class stepped forward and said simply, "I should have helped you pick up your books." Maya looked at her, really looked at her, then smiled, small, real, and entirely her own. "You can help me find room 235, she said, and together they walked down the hallway. There is something this story asks us to carry long after it ends. It is not simply about a bully who met his consequences. It is not about a father who abused his badge, or a system that looked the other way for too long. It is about what Maya chose to do in the moments no one was watching. She chose documentation over destruction, patience over panic, dignity over despair. She did not wait to be rescued. She simply refused to be erased. And her father, that quiet man with old reading glasses and half-finished coffee, had spent 26 years ensuring that the law was a shield for everyone, not just the powerful, not just the connected. Everyone. He had taught his daughter not with speeches, not with warnings, but with the way he lived. And on that Tuesday morning, when the world tested everything he had taught her, she did not break. She stood. There is a kind of courage in this world that does not announce itself with noise or fire. It announces itself with stillness, with the steady voice of someone who has decided they will not be made small by the smallness of others. Maya Kingsley carried her father's legacy not in his name or his title or his power. She carried it in her spine. And that, more than any verdict, any badge, or any gavel, is what justice is truly made of. If this story moved something in you today, if it reminded you why dignity matters, why truth matters, why one quiet act of courage can change the entire direction of a room, then you are exactly who Beyond the Badge was made for. We believe the most powerful stories are not always the most famous ones. Sometimes the deepest heroism happens in school hallways, in holding rooms, in the space between what is done to someone and how they choose to respond. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, please subscribe to Beyond the Badge. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that matters. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today, a parent, a student, a friend who is quietly fighting their own battle. And if this story touched your heart, leave us a comment below. We read every single one. Because beyond the badge, beyond the title, beyond whatever power anyone wears on the outside, there is always a story. And every story deserves to be heard. Beyond the Badge. Real stories, real courage, real humanity.